Chosen one. God said, I know you're tired, but don't give up now. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. Part 1. Chosen one. Stop for a moment. Before you continue with your day, before you think about everything that is worrying you, before you allow another negative thought to enter your mind, listen carefully. Because this message is for the part of you that nobody else can see, the part that is tired, the part that keeps smiling in front of people, while silently asking God, how much longer? You have been strong for a long time. You've carried responsibilities. You've dealt with disappointment. You've watched certain plans fail. You've experienced moments when people you trusted didn't stand beside you. And perhaps the hardest part is that you kept going even when you didn't feel like going anymore. You prayed, you waited, you hoped, you tried again. And when nothing changed, you tried to convince yourself that everything would eventually be okay. But deep inside, you became tired. Chosen one. God sees that tiredness. He sees the moments when you sit alone and don't know what to say. He sees the tears you wipe away before anyone notices. He sees the prayers you cannot even finish because you're emotionally exhausted. And God says, my child, I know you're tired, but I did not bring you this far to abandon you now. Chosen one. There is a difference between being tired and being defeated. You may be tired, but you are not defeated. You may feel weak, but you are not forgotten. You may not understand what is happening. But that doesn't mean God has stopped working. Sometimes, the hardest part of the journey comes right before a major change. Think about a seed. When you put a seed into the ground, from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. Days pass, then more days. The soil remains quiet. If you only looked at the surface, you might think the seed had failed. But underneath the ground, something is happening. Roots are forming. The seed is breaking open. A new life is beginning. And then, at the right time, something finally appears above the surface. Chosen one. Your life may feel like that seed right now. You may look around and say, nothing is changing. But you cannot see what is happening beneath the surface. You don't see every conversation. You don't see every opportunity being prepared. You don't see every lesson God is teaching you. You don't see how circumstances are being rearranged. You don't see the doors that are being prepared. You only see today. God sees what is coming. He says, don't judge the entire story by what you can see in this chapter. Chosen one. Remember Joseph. There was a time when Joseph's life seemed to be going in the completely opposite direction from his dreams. He had dreams about his future, but instead of immediately entering greatness, he entered a pit, then slavery, then prison. Imagine how confusing that must have been. He had received a dream, yet his circumstances looked like the dream was impossible. If Joseph had judged God's promise by his circumstances, he would have given up. But the prison wasn't the end. The pit wasn't the end. The betrayal wasn't the end. God was still writing, and eventually, Joseph went from being forgotten in prison to standing before Pharaoh. One day changed everything. Chosen one. Your situation can change faster than you think. You may spend months wondering what God is doing, and then one conversation, one opportunity, one decision, one unexpected connection can completely change the direction of your life. That's why you cannot give up based on today's circumstances. You don't know what tomorrow is carrying. You don't know what God has already started. You don't know which door is about to open. You don't know which person is about to enter your life. You don't know which opportunity is going to become the beginning of your next chapter. God says, you are closer to the answer than you realize. Chosen one. Maybe you've been praying for financial stability. Maybe you've been praying for a better future. Maybe you've been asking God for direction. Maybe you've been waiting for healing in your relationships. Maybe you've been asking for peace. Whatever it is. Don't assume that because the answer hasn't arrived yet. God isn't listening. Sometimes. The waiting period is part of the preparation. You want the blessing. God wants to prepare you to carry it. You want the door. God wants to prepare you for what is behind it. You want the opportunity. God wants to build the character necessary to handle it, because receiving something before you're ready can become a burden instead of a blessing. Chosen one. That's why God may be working on you before he changes what's around. But then he says something else. Don't stop now. Chosen one. Sometimes the greatest temptation isn't to stop believing in God, it's to stop believing that your own life can become better. You still believe God exists, but you've stopped expecting anything good for yourself. You pray, but without hope. You dream, but without expectation. You wake up, but already assume tomorrow will be the same. God wants to break that mindset, because disappointment can become a prison. Even when the physical circumstances have changed, you can walk out of yesterday, but still carry yesterday inside your mind. God says, I am changing more than your circumstances. I am changing the way you see your future. Chosen one. You have to understand something about preparation. Before a building rises, there is excavation. Before the foundation becomes visible, the ground is disturbed. From the outside, it can look like destruction. But the builders know something is being prepared. Maybe that's what this season is. You see things being removed, plans changing, relationships ending, old habits breaking, comfort disappearing. And you're thinking, why is everything becoming so difficult? But perhaps God is preparing the foundation because the future you're asking for needs a stronger foundation than the life you've been living. Chosen one. You cannot build something new while holding tightly to everything old. There are habits you need to release, thoughts you need to release, fear you need to release, people you need to release, old versions of yourself you need to release. Not because those things were meaningless, but because they have completed their purpose. God says, you cannot walk confidently into your next season while constantly looking backward at the last one. Chosen one. Look at Abraham. When God called him forward, he had to leave what was familiar. The familiar can feel safe, even when it isn't where you're supposed to remain. Sometimes, we stay in places simply because we know them. We stay around people because we've known them for years. We stay in old patterns because they're comfortable, but comfort isn't always confirmation. Sometimes, the very thing you're afraid to leave is the thing preventing you from discovering what is ahead. Chosen one. God may be asking you to move, not necessarily to another city, not necessarily to another job, but internally, to move from fear to faith, from bitterness to forgiveness, from confusion to prayer, from comparison to purpose, from desperation to trust, from surviving to actually living again. God says, your next season begins when you stop allowing your past to control your decisions. Chosen one, there is something else you need to remember. You are not behind. I know it may feel that way. You look at other people's lives, and it seems like everyone is moving faster than you. Someone has the career you wanted. Someone has the relationship you prayed for. Someone has the financial stability you're working toward. Someone seems to have everything figured out, and you wonder, why am I still here? But comparison can make you disrespect your own journey. You are looking at someone's visible chapter and comparing it to your invisible chapter. You don't know their struggles. You don't know their private battles. You don't know what they sacrificed. And more importantly, their timeline isn't your timeline. God says, stop measuring your journey against someone else's clock. Chosen one. A flower doesn't look at another flower and say, why aren't I blooming at the same time? Different seeds, different soil, different seasons, different timing. Your journey is unique. What God is doing in your life doesn't need to look like what He's doing in someone else's. You don't need their blessing. You need yours. You don't need their path. You need yours. You don't need their timing. You need God's timing for you. Chosen one, and sometimes, the delay is actually protecting you. Imagine receiving something before you have the wisdom to manage it. Imagine entering a relationship before you've healed. Imagine receiving money before learning discipline. Imagine receiving influence before developing character. Imagine getting the opportunity you've prayed for and discovering that you're not ready to carry it. That's why preparation matters. God says, I am not delaying you to punish you. I am preparing you so that what comes next will not destroy you. Chosen one. So if you're waiting, use the waiting. Learn, grow, prepare, read, practice, pray, work, improve yourself, build your character, take care of what is already in your hands. Because sometimes, the best way to prepare for a larger blessing